Welcome to Stepping Toward Justice with me, Sarah A. Ford, a podcast where we'll explore what justice really looks like inside of a courtroom, outside in our communities, and where access to justice is lacking. We'll talk with advocates, survivors, and changemakers working to make justice a reality for us all. We can't change what we don't understand or acknowledge, so let's take a step together towards justice. I am here with one of the most fabulous women I know, Chandra McPherson-Gibbs, Chief Gibbs of the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Department. You are a legend in the area of victim advocacy, and I am so grateful that you are joining us today. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm good, Sarah. It's exciting. Of course, I think that you are a rock star in the field. And definitely, especially in the beginning of my journey, you were one of the ones that was in the trenches as an advocate, as a legal advocate, working with me at the solicitor's office when you were at the solicitor's office. So it's a joy to come hang out and talk. We share all the time, but it's good to hang out this way.
So you are the chief.
Yes. I'm our chief of staff. So I'm our third in command here, and I get to hang out daily with one of the newest gurus, Dr. Kenny Kinsey. He's our chief deputy. So he and I get to hang out on a very regular basis, but helping with the daily oversight of the agency and really driving Sheriff's vision for Orangeburg County. And then, but one of the components that was my, I guess, yes, I'll accept, but type things was that I would still be as hands-on as possible with the Victim Services Division. So though I'm overseeing, the entire department, Victim Services is one that has a stronghold that I'm like, okay, hey, I want to make sure that I'm still daily engaged into what we're doing.
I can't tell you, I cannot think. First of all, Sheriff Ravenel is amazing, but then to have you and Dr. Kenny Kinsey, I mean, talk about amazing dream team, people who have been, speaking of in the trenches, doing the work, advocating for the community, advocating for victims. I mean, that is what you've been doing for the entire time I've ever known you, as a victim advocate and then the director of victim services. I mean, how did you get into this? I mean, you have an amazing heart, but how did you jump into this?
Crazy as it sounds, and a lot of people do not know this, Sarah, but I was a school teacher. So I was teaching preschool at the Child Development Center at South Carolina State University. And one of the parents, and he wasn't slick, but after his child was getting ready to graduate from the program and go to kindergarten, he says to me, hey, I think you really would be a great advocate, and we're looking for some advocates. And I had no idea what that entailed, what it was. And then going online, looking for, well, what is a victim's advocate? It was, that was 20 years ago. So it was not a lot out there. And at that time, Sheriff Williams, Sheriff Larry Williams was the sheriff. And so there's this bright-eyed 23-year-old that comes in his office, and I went through a series of interviews. And at first I was like, well, why would this man have me go through all of these interviews? Then after seeing what we see and dealing with what we deal with, I understood a little more of, do you really know what you're getting into? And so I started out just like many of the advocates who come in now, I was like, okay, I'll try it. I don't know what I'm trying, but I'll try it. And fell in love with it. Fell in love with it. Even the hard parts, as you know, this is not one of those fields where every day is a thank you. It is some days that literally rip your heart out, and you're just like, how is society like this? But I can't, other than teaching other people how to do this job, I absolutely love it.
It's the best. It really is. You can teach people. I say this all the time. I can teach somebody how to be a lawyer. You know, a new lawyer comes into work at,
Yeah.
in our legal department. I can teach you how to be, but I can't teach you to have a heart and a passion for people. And
That part.
you've got that part. That
That
is
part.
you. That is you.
I love it. I love it. And some days are good. And as you know, what we often say is like your advocates, you have to be that heartwarming person for your victim, your survivor. And then there are other moments where you have to be a pit bull, you know, to make sure that their rights are protected. And so you have to know how to balance that and what that balancing act looks like. And sometimes it's exhausting. And there are some days where I got it right. And there are some other days where I gotta go back and fix that. Gotta go back and, you know, kind of brush up on that. So those days happen.
That's all of us though, but we can always learn. I feel like pretty much every day I learn something new in working with crime victims and doing this type of
Yes.
work. You
Yeah.
learn something from it, or at least we should be, right?
Absolutely. And you should be teachable. I had to teach a class this morning on communication to new advocates for Victims' Rights Week. And I said, you know, one of the things that they talk about is that the fact that when you're communicating, remember, you don't know it all. And I told them, I said, and if you are at the point where you know it all, retire. And they were like, what?
Are you
Retire.
starting out? Goodbye, goodbye. No need to be here.
If you know it all, retire. I still have to call people. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I called you like, I know it's something in there. Help, you know? So and that's the joy. That's another one of those joys where you do get to meet those persons like yourself, Sarah, who've been in the trenches and that you can call and are like, I got you, I'm coming, you know, and
I
whatever
may be in a baseball hat and my hair. I'm going to the gym. I got glasses on and sweatpants, but I will show up.
I'm showing up,
I
I'm
will show
there.
up.
And but I think that's what we give to victims of crime, you know, because oftentimes when we show up, it's not in the pretty face, especially if you are a on scene responder. You are responding when the ball has dropped, you know. So, and they don't necessarily need you with the pink lipstick and the cute earrings, because 2 o'clock in the morning, they're not looking for that, but they are looking for somebody who cares. And that's what I always try to make sure that we get across at our agency.
For sure. So let's kind of back up.
Okay.
A victim service provider, a victim advocate. I'm a victim's rights lawyer, but I consider myself a victim's advocate. How do you define a victim advocate?
A person who can wear many hats and become what that victim needs, you know. And so when I think of that, I mean, a person who shows up for the victim, knows what their rights are. You can't protect what you don't know. I always say that. So knowing what their rights are and then being able to explain this system in a way that makes sense, because our judicial system has so many different turns and grooves and pockets and twists and turns. We get confused in it. So being able to make it make sense, being that it's so many different components, being that reality check that it's not TV, you know, because they're, you know, so that victim advocate is able to have that conversation with the victim of crime and explain to them this process. And basically, you know, I guess the nuts and bolts of it is a navigator, you know, a navigator who cares, and really can take the time to stop, share, explain, speak for when they don't know they don't know the system. So it's so many different hats. And I think the more that we become entrenched in this field, that's when people realize, oh, it's not me just going to court. No, it's not. It's you being a listening ear at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning when they're overwhelmed because the person that they love, genuinely love, also is their abuser, also is the breadwinner who is no longer in the home, and the children don't understand. So they need you at 5 o'clock in the morning just to say, I don't know if I made the right decision, and not to feel like they're being judged.
Yes.
Because their mind is really racing on, what do I do? Because I still love this person, but I still have this bruise, but I still love them. So it's so many different, it's so many different hats that just can't be pigeonholed into one thing.
It's so true. And centering a victim in a system that doesn't include victims really at all, right? I mean, that is a huge part of what a victim advocate does.
Yes. And making them feel like they matter, because there's so many things where it's like, well, you're hearing all of these rights, you're hearing all of these things that they're get a chance to do, like one of the most heartbreaking things I can remember very early on was dealing with an arraignment, and it was a homicide, and he refused to come up. The suspect refused to come up. And so the family came in, they were all there because they wanted to be present through everything. And then it's like, well, what's going to happen? Well, he's waived his rights and he refuses to come up. And the devastation of, you mean he chose to take my loved one, and he gets the choice not to face us as the family? And so as an advocate, being able to hear that pain, allow them to realize that they're entitled to that, right, but this is still the system. So explaining, he gets that chance today, but there will be some right more steps that, no, he's going to have to, at some point in this journey, look at you as the family members, and being able to articulate that in a way that makes them feel like they're included.
When someone is a victim, the autonomy is gone, the sense of control is gone. And one of the things that I love about the most amazing advocates I know is that you try to put that power back in the hands of the victim, giving them choices, giving them options. So often we hear, well, why would that person stay with an abuser, or why don't they leave? And these things are so much more complicated than people who don't understand victimization, trauma, any of that. It's so much more complicated. And so, you do an excellent job of centering that victim and giving them power and control in a situation that is completely out of control.
Completely. And it comes from, full transparency. I grew up in a two-parent home. That was amazing. Traveled. My father retired military, traveling the world. And it was really just the nucleus of us. It was the five of us, my mom, my dad, and my siblings and myself. That was it. I mean, we're in Germany, and it is the five of us. And so there were certain things that I was just not exposed to. And so then coming into this field, and you do have those moments where it's like, did I completely understand when I first got into this field? Absolutely not, because it was foreign to me. He did what? But then also that process and meeting them where they are, so that they can talk, so that they can feel heard, and being able to be heard in a place of no judgment. So then it becomes, like you said, when it's time to go to court and the judge mentions, well, this is an ongoing thing. I don't care if it's the 50th time. It's against the law for this to happen. And that would be the same way that I would do with my law enforcement colleagues. I don't care if you've been to this house 30 times. When you get out of the car, you get out like it's the first time. They are due that respect, because you don't know like you said, the financial woes, I've got there's so many different reasons. And like I tell people all the time, I go home to an amazing husband and a cute dog. I don't, there's certain things that I don't have to live with. I don't have to live with the disruption of my peace and different things of that nature. And so it makes you sensitive. And then it does put that pit bull in you, like, not on my watch. You're not gonna just dismiss them. You're not. not here. No.
Dignity and respect is at the center of all of it. It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sarah. Yeah, that's it.
So, if someone has been a victim, how soon do they meet an advocate? I mean, you're talking about going out in the middle of the night. I mean,
Yeah.
y'all are first responders, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there's some, and it really looks at the makeup of your agencies, because some there's a gap there for us at Orangeburg County. If it is, if there has been if that crime has happened, and what happens is our deputies will ask, do you need an advocate? Sometimes they'll ask, and sometimes they'll know based on what they're dealing with. I just need to get one rolling. Because you may have an assault and battery that is where the victim says, I don't want anybody right now. I do want somebody to follow up with me, but I don't really want to talk right now. And that's fine. But if if it's something with a child involved, if we've got a kidnapping, if we've got a sexual assault, if domestic violence, homicides, shooting into dwellings, those type of things, then you have an advocate that is on scene. Because what ends up happening is, people see these lights, they see, all of this movement, and nobody's there to explain it. And so our advocates then respond, and they respond to explain the process, and then to just be there. And it could be something as simple as, do you want me to help with calls? Do you want me to help people? Do we need to find another place for you to stay tonight? Making those particular arrangements. It could be a burglary victim who says, I just don't feel safe sleeping here.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay here, and I don't have anywhere to go. Okay, let me find some resources, because the law enforcement is focusing on solving the crime and finding out who did it, processing evidence. Where your victim advocate, your victim services provider, is there to explain this entire process, but then to also make sure, what do you need? And so the expectation that a victim of crime should have is, somebody's coming to make sure that I'm good. I know people are solving the crime, but somebody's coming to make sure that I'm good in whatever way that means. I mean, you can have an advocate that just, have you eaten? Depending on what type of what call we're on, have you eaten? You need to get clothes. You ran off here, you ran off there, you don't even have clothes. I need clothing, shelter, because we can get into the bills later.
Right.
But right now, while this trauma has immediately happened, and I really don't know what's going on, I need to have somebody who becomes my eyes, my ears, and then also explains this world, because it is a little crazy sometimes.
It is a little crazy. Well, that's a good point for us to take a quick break. We will be right back with Chief Gibbs. We are back with Chief Gibbs of the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Department, an all-around wonderful, incredible woman who I am very proud to be one of my very first guests on this podcast. How do you do what you do? I mean, you have to have a community that supports you. You have to have a community that understands. You have to have, a sheriff and a, law enforcement community that understands. How do you establish that? How do you create that?
You hit some key points there just now, Sarah. The community and your sheriff, or your director, or your chief of police, they have to believe in victim services. They have to. Being in this 20 years, 20 plus years, you see the evolution where, you had some people that would just say, oh, well, those are ones who just grab tissue and give hugs. Absolutely not. It's so far past that. And so making sure that, we've seen success because our sheriff has always had victim services at the table. So if it was creating policies, victim services was at the table. If it was hiring deputies, victim services was at the table, because promotions, victim services was at the table, because if you cannot take care of the community, then, and your sole focus is, let me kick down this door, let me grab this bad guy. Well, he's a bad guy because of what he did to a victim. And so having that buy-in for us from Sheriff Ravenel has really contributed to the success of our agency. And then also being able to go into the community.
You are busy. You are always talking to somebody. You are always, you know, just reaching out to these different groups, talking to people about victim services, how important it is, and trying to change people's minds about this preconceived notion that people have of victims and survivors and what they're supposed to be like.
Absolutely. And realizing, I remember, and Sarah, you would have got a kick out of this. I was invited one time to a First Ladies, this is pastors' wives, it was their session. So you've got about 75 to 80 women in this group, and it's all pastors' wives. And some of them were, you could tell they were a little like, we're going to talk about domestic violence. Okay.
That doesn't happen. No, that doesn't happen here. What are you talking about?
What do you mean? And so when you start and you start with statistics and start with, okay, well, 1 in 4, and how I did it was, I didn't even tell them the stat first, Sarah. I asked every 4th female to stand up. And so after they're all standing up, it's like, this would be the number of women based on current statistics that have experienced some form of domestic violence. You could have heard a pin drop, but I could also see where there were women that were finally like, yes, yeah, you're right. And then the more we talked, the more you started seeing women they felt safe enough to say, it was me. It may not have been with my husband, but I've experienced it. Right. And so I think that has always been at the forefront for me when we're doing these conversations in the community, where people feel like they are safe enough to be heard and to be validated. And then you also have those that are like, I just want to help. I really want to help. We've had churches, we have something called a care closet, where if someone has their house is burned down, burglary, and they don't feel like they can literally go and shop out of this closet, from toiletries to clothes. And it's a variety of sizes, because all of us are a variety of sizes.
Very true.
So it's a variety of sizes, but that was from the community. That was from the community. And, and they feel like, okay, hey, because you're here, you're caring. And it's putting a face. We launched a program called Know Us Before You Need Us, because we wanted the community to know who we were before we showed up on scene. And so what we found that was so amazing is that we would come on scenes and someone would say, oh no, you can trust her. She just came to my school and did something. Oh no, you can trust him. He just did a presentation. So it was developing these community bonds, where when we were on scenes, you've got somebody that's also saying, hey, I need to tell you something. And so they're giving us information about what's happened or about a crime, because we built the relationship prior to. So, and having a sheriff, because I am a little unorthodox at times. So
aren't all the best people though? Like, right, you got to be a little bit of a rebel.
And he's just like, okay, well, we'll try it. And so having him and trusting our creativity, building that bond, has really kept a continuity of, now I'm coming up on scenes, unfortunately, and they're like, oh no, y'all are good. Because if I see Chandra, I know what she does. I know who she's got in place. Oh no, we're good. And you just want to be like, oh, thank you so much. Oh no, wait, I got a job to do. But it's you've built that, and it's creative. Whether or not, I mean, from high schools to sewing circles to elder care, just showing up has been tremendous for us.
I think that, we often see the worst of society on a daily basis. And I think that most people, they don't want to think about that. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to acknowledge that, but it doesn't mean that it's not there, that these
That
things
part.
don't exist,
Yeah.
that, you know, child abuse and sexual assault and elder abuse, these are things that happen every day in our communities. There are things that we can do about it, though.
Hmm.
For someone that wants to maybe, y'all have a volunteer advocacy program, right?
We do. So
Which
excited.
is so unique because you're training just regular
Yes.
people to be advocates in their everyday life, which obviously that I'm all about that. Tell us
And
about it.
it's huge because what happened is we were at a training, we were somewhere, and I could literally see this lady saying, like, I want to help. And she's like, I don't want to go, I don't want to carry a gun, but I really want to help. And I was like, well, mm, I could give my advocates a break on the weekends. I could, kind of give them some balance because some weeks are hard. Like
Yes.
some weeks are intense, especially when you are on call and you're responding to these day in and day out. It can just be, I need a break. And so we created this program. We typed it up and presented it to Sheriff. He said yes. And we presented it to the state because we wanted it to be an accredited portion where it's not just, oh, you're just out here playing. No,
Right.
you are a certified, gone through the training victim services provider. And so it has been successful. We've probably had it now for, I want to say maybe Sarah, about 10 years now. We've had it for about 10 and a half years. And it has been incredible. It has been incredible because it has been where you have people who want to do it. It's a vetting process. It's, background checks, interviews, all of those different things. And I'm very, it's a strenuous process, not something that's like, oh my gosh, I'm retired, but it's a strenuous
Yeah.
process in the aspect of making sure that people understand, can you handle this? Because I do have some advocates that
Not
they
easy.
just want to work in the office. Let me just work with the office and kind of answer calls and field those that come in. But I've got some advocates that are, I'll meet you out there. I'll meet you at the hospital. I'll meet you, I'll meet you there. And so it's been successful. And what it does for my salaried advocates is it gives them a break, because it can be, you're talking about day in, day out. You're hearing, like you just said, the worst of the worst. So sometimes you just need a second just to, let me turn it off. I love it, but let me turn it off for a second so I can reset.
Well, there's, with this type of work, there's a huge amount of turnover because it is incredibly stressful. It is incredibly the opposite of life affirming. Because you're like, I don't know, my brain didn't work fast, but it was like the opposite of that because you're like,
Yeah.
this is crap. Like, how is this really what happens? And so giving that break to those advocates that do this on the regular, I think it sustains them and helps them to continue in this work, which is better for crime victims because they have that
Absolutely.
experience.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen it in the last, I'd say about last 4 or 5 years. There's been a strong focus on dealing with self-care as it pertains to victim services providers, because you are constantly showing up. I can remember an advocate. She had Sarah. I think it was. I think she was going on her fourth child death in a week.
Oh God.
And
Bless
they
you.
were all of them had been under the age of like 8. And so she comes out of the emergency room. We know we're getting ready to have to do a death notification. She comes out of the emergency room and she's just like, she's out of her mouth. She's telling me I'm good. Visually, I'm looking and I'm like, no, you're good. Check out, go home. And she's like, no, I can do it. I'm not debating your skill set. I know you're good, but this is unrealistic for the best of us. Go home, and reset. Matter of fact, go home. And I think this was like a Saturday. I said, and I really don't want to see you until Tuesday. You don't have call the rest of the week, the weekend, you're done. And it wasn't she couldn't do it, but it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic that I'm looking at 15-year-olds laying in the street. It's unrealistic that I'm doing death notification for people who are in the prime of their life. It's unrealistic to me that I'm giving this death notification to people, and at that same age, I was trying to get outside so I could ride my bike. They're dodging bullets. That's unheard of. And so it's been intentional to make sure that we find ways to reset so that we can be exactly what you said, at our best for the victim, because it can be exhausting if we're honest about it.
Vicarious trauma is one of those things that will sneak up on someone who works with victims, law enforcement, doctors, nurses, teachers, people that have experienced and walked alongside someone who has been through a traumatic experience. I always talk about, it's like if somebody is in a pool and they get out of the pool and they come and hug you. I'm wet now.
Yes.
I have water all over me. I wasn't in the pool, but I've still got water on me. I'm still wet. And that is what vicarious trauma is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is such a perfect example, Sarah. That's such a, and then you have to, the other day, not the other day, maybe a couple of months ago, I looked at my husband and I chuckled and I said, you didn't know you were signing up for all of this, because it does take so much away. You're going to miss certain things. You're checking out. When you're a victim advocate that is one of those on-scene ones, you're going to have to drive separate cars to certain locations because at any given moment. And you also know that there's a need that especially with that burglary victim, they're going to call you at 2:00 in the morning because the first little piece of a creak that they hear in the house, somebody's breaking in. They're not paranoid, they're traumatized. And so as a victim advocate, to be able to validate that and be able to say, because they're going to apologize. I know you do not have to apologize for being the person who was victimized. That's not what we do.
Your sense of security has literally been robbed from you, been taken from you. Don't apologize for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think over, the past, I'd say probably decade, but maybe the past 5 years have been really difficult for law enforcement? How has a victim advocate, I know that you really mentor to law enforcement that you work with because they're dealing with so much, the community is dealing with so much. How do you rationalize that? How do you deal with that?
Having those tough conversations. You can't avoid that. There are areas of our community that have strained relationships with law enforcement. It is what it is. Communities of color, based on situations that may be in a whole nother state, has created a strain on relationship with law enforcement. If we don't acknowledge that first, it will continue to be strained. So it is that place of, so now that we know that it's strained, what do we do? How do we build that rapport? How do we maintain that rapport? And that's one of the things that we had to be very diligent with here at the sheriff's office, is how do we maintain and build on that rapport? Because we do have a great rapport, but we can also see what's happening in this world. And so it's one of those things where somebody, when having the conversation with the guys, that when you get out of the car and someone meets you with aggression, it may not be at you. It may be at I'm not saying that you're not to be vigilant. I'm not saying that you're not to be aware, but I also am understanding what is driving this aggression that is coming there. And a lot of times it's that they're taking on something that another officer may have done. They're taking on something that they saw from television. And so having that conversation with them, and then having that stern but sensitive conversation with your victims and saying, we're not them.
Right.
We're not them. Give them the time, give them the opportunity. Don't go at them at 50. They just got here. What? They just let's come. And so that's where that victim advocate comes in to try to with relationship building, because you did come to the last community event. So you did see me there. So then it's now when we were at that community event, weren't we laughing and joking? Yes, ma'am. So let's go back, but that comes with acknowledging why, but now let's figure to this middle ground. And really, I think that has been what's been crucial for us, is that we haven't dismissed it for our victims, and we didn't dismiss it for our law enforcement officers as well. It was they came out and they were just yelling for no reason. You're right. No, you don't have to take it. I'm not telling you to walk out and just be like, oh, calm down. No, I'm not telling you to do that. But having that honest and transparent conversation has worked wonders, has really worked wonders. We've done some things at some of the local colleges where, and we've got two amazing HBCUs here, Claflin University and the South Carolina State University. But we've got two amazing colleges that have held forums that were not easy forums. They weren't those cookie cutter forums. Those were forums where people were telling you their fear. But those were also forums where they were hearing for the law enforcement officer, I want to go, that law enforcement officer saying, I want to go home too. I've got a wife and I've got a kid, and we got trauma that's coming at us. So and being able to have that healthy dialogue, right, that took its highs and its lows. Because Sarah, some of those are, oh, wait. But, but being able, I guess the long way of answering that was the transparency and the honest conversation, and being able to validate the fears, because it's real fear. It vicarious trauma. This is what I just saw on television, and it happened to somebody that looks like me.
Right.
And it happened by someone who was wearing a uniform that looked like yours. I don't know. And you gotta, when we acknowledge that, I think that's where growth comes, when people feel like you're hearing me enough for me to be validated.
We can't change the world if we just continue to just say, well, it'll get better. Someone will take care of it. It'll happen. Let's just have the faith. Listen, I have a tattoo that says believe, and I do. Yeah. But also you have to get out there. You have to do the things, have those tough conversations, because nothing gets better by stuffing it down.
Absolutely.
And not shedding the light on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your belief in the world of victim services, that is such a powerful word. In the world of victim services, because, you're dealing with victims of crime who are, oh, you just made that up. That person isn't really stalking you. You're just paranoid. Oh, you've made that up. That really wasn't a sign of abuse. He wasn't really rubbing your leg.
You understood that. You misunderstood. You didn't take that the right way.
That's not how he meant it. I can't be concerned about what he meant. I know what happened. Right. And so victim advocates with that word believe are just someone like, no, I'm here. I've got you. I know that you may have family members who said, well, she's always making up a story. He always has something going on. I mean, he's always I'm not them. And that sometimes sometimes becomes even a safe haven for victims of crime, sometimes when it's not somebody who's in their immediate circle, you know, that has heard their story over and over again.
Right.
And so that place of belief is so powerful, because it leads to validation, and it leads to the empowerment of giving them their power back, because some people have been stripped so much to a point that they become silent. And so they are being victimized, traumatized, and remaining in silence. So yeah.
Well, we know that anytime that we're in a room together with victims, we will not be silent for victims. We will make sure they have that voice. No doubt about
Absolutely.
that. People often ask me, how do we change these mentalities that have, gotten us to a place where a 12-year-old little boy is gunned down on the street, or a little girl is assaulted by, someone that she trusted. And, one of the things that I love is a community of advocates. And it's really an international community of advocates all over the world. And one of the hashtags that has been a recent, the Sexual Assault Awareness Month, hashtag start by believing.
Mhm.
That's, for me, that is the number one thing that people can do to support victims.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How many times, and we wouldn't be able to count, that we've dealt with a child sexual assault victim who discloses, but then they've also tell us during that disclosure they told somebody else, but they didn't believe them, or I was afraid to tell them because I didn't think that they would believe me. That is um that is why we have adults now living with undealt trauma, because no one believed them. And so because no one believed them, they kept it. They've held on to it. And it's playing out in different areas of their life. And so with sexual assault, awareness month, it's always been that place of, no, I don't care why you were at their house at 2 o'clock in the morning. That has nothing to do with it. I don't care if you were walking down the street in your boxers. I don't care. I don't care if you were I don't care if you were laying next to him. You
If you
know,
have had sex with that person 7,000 times and this is 7,001 and you said no,
I believe you.
I believe you.
I believe you. And sometimes the look of just appreciation when you say to a person, I believe you, and they know that you're genuine with it, it's almost like a wave of relief, like, "Ugh, somebody, and so it's important. I love that hashtag, because that's where it starts with the fact that I believe you. And so when I believe you, I validate you. When I validate you, I affirm you. When I affirm you, I have heard you. And that is what so many people and so many victims of crime is: hear me. I know I'm the strong one. I know I'm the one that always takes on the burdens for my family, but I just had my body violated. Hear me. I just had my house burglarized, my place of peace, my sanctuary. Somebody rifled through it. Hear me. I know my son may not have been the best to you. I know my son may not have this stellar record, but he was still my son.
That's my baby.
So that's still my baby. And so that is what, it's daily. And I mean, but it's daily my heartbeat for the victims that we serve, for the communities that we serve, that they know that we're here and that we're affirming them. At the end of the day, that's somebody's child, that's somebody's baby. That's somebody who has to go home tonight without their loved one. One of the things I tell my dad often, I lost my mom in 2011. She passed in 2011, but she wasn't taken from us by the hands of someone else, you know? And so when you realize like, wow, like families are really processing this, you know, I didn't have a chance to prepare, you know, and we talk about Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We know by statistics, most sexual assaults are not done by strangers.
No, ma'am.
So this happened. So I've got to mentally process, how did this happen to somebody that they start blaming, how didn't I see the sign?
Right.
How didn't I know? How didn't I? And then we come along as service providers from whatever part of the community and say to them, you didn't have to know the signs. You didn't have to see the signs. It wasn't your job to see the signs. It was your job to be who you are, and they violated that. And so those are the important moments. Those are the moments where it's like, okay, yeah, this is why we do what we do, you know. And I don't get me wrong, Sarah, I have had to call with tears in my eyes to some of my colleagues and just saying, how is this our world? How did I just tell a 14-year-old's mom that her son, how is this? What? You know, and really having to be like, hey, and we deal with it, we process through it, therapy or however, and we're back in the trenches. But it does start with that victim knowing, I don't care who else is in this room, somebody's believing you and somebody's going to fight for you.
There is nothing, the number one thing that people like to hear is their name. I think that, when they hear Chandra or Sarah,
Yeah.
respecting them and seeing them fully. So often people think that because of their scars, because of the worst thing that's ever happened to them, that their value is depleted, that they have shame that they don't want to release. And I think that, as a victims' rights lawyer, as a victims advocate, we on a daily basis have to also be that counselor and say,
Mhm.
this is not you. Sometimes from the worst thing that happens to you, your mission will come. You think you will never recover. You can and you will. You think that there will never be a day that you don't think about that sexual assault and relive it. But
Yeah.
you can. You
Yeah.
can. You can move from being a victim to a survivor and
Yeah.
thriving in your life. And
Absolutely.
it's a privilege to do this work. It's a privilege to do this work alongside of you, because you are a true advocate and ally for victims all across the state of South Carolina and beyond. It just, having conversations like this make me so happy, and it energizes me for those hard days where I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall with what's
Yeah.
happening with things that are happening in court. And I'm grateful to have you there as a sister in this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you do. And Sarah, I don't say it lightly, and I understand this is that we're on your podcast, but I don't say it lightly. You know, you advocate in an arena where we can't go, because we can go in there and we can sit, but there's just a way that to have people like you that are standing in front of that judge, that are holding our judicial system accountable to making sure that the victims feel and know that they are heard, because it can be on paper all day. It can be on paper all day.
Yes.
But when there's a voice that's saying, these words will have life and these words will be honored for them, for their family. And so it's important. And I have, from our inception of our sisterhood over 20 something years ago, it's been consistent. And it's been consistent of that strong, okay, it's almost like a relay race where, all right, Sarah, I brought them as far as I can go. I'm passing this baton. and you take it and you've gone with it. And even the work that you do, you know, with Essie Van, with everybody else in the world, you are a trusted voice, and they know. It's almost like, oh, I'm calling Sarah. That literally is, advocates get that. Oh, I'm calling Sarah because because there's certain, as we know, there's a legal jargon that we may not be familiar with. And so, you come in and it's like, okay, yeah, but the code here says, and it's like, told you I was calling Sarah.
Call me anytime. Anytime. I am always happy to stand with you and with victims to make sure that their rights are not, it's not a checklist. It's not something that we just say, check, I told them that. It has to be meaningful. We have to assert them. We have to enforce them. And, it's okay to get rowdy sometimes while we're doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. Well, Chandra, thank you so much for being here, for sharing about what you do, over at the Sheriff's Department as an advocate. Your heart for victims, your heart for people, the passion that you have is just, I'm just so grateful that you joined me today. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to hang out with you. So thank you. And of course, anytime y'all are here in Orangeburg County, stop by and see us.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Thanks for joining Stepping Toward Justice. You can follow along on social media, YouTube, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.